You're listening to History Obscura, where forgotten moments of the past drift quietly back into the light. Tonight, we travel to a summer evening in 1783, when the sky above Europe burned white with fire, and thousands believed the world was ending. This is the night the sky caught fire, the story of the Great Meteor that terrified a continent, then vanished from memory. Chapter 1: The Night of Fire. It was the kind of night that lived in silence, no thunder, no wind, just the soft breath of August air drifting through the open windows of sleeping houses. The date was August 18th, 1783, a Monday evening. And above Britain, a sky that had always been ordinary was about to split open. Somewhere near Windsor Castle, a few men of science lingered on the terrace, enjoying the last light of day. They were astronomers, not poets, yet what they saw next would haunt the language of both. At 9:18 p.m., a streak of brilliance tore across the heavens, a white-blue flame burning silently at first, vast and unnatural. It was not lightning, it did not fade, it moved. From the north to the south, across nearly all of England, the light rolled like a river of fire. Eyewitnesses later said it was as wide as the moon, stretching from horizon to horizon. It carried with it a glowing tail that shimmered long after the main body had passed. In some towns, it illuminated the rooftops, as if the sun had risen for one last impossible moment. Shepherds in the fields froze mid-step. Fishermen along the coast turned toward the glow, shielding their eyes. Children woke, crying from sleep, and in more than one village, church bells began to ring. Because for many that night, it was not a meteor, it was a sign. And the only question that mattered was, of what? Reports flooded from every direction, from Edinburgh to Cornwall, from the North Sea to the coast of France. Each story sounded the same, and yet none agreed on the details. Some said the fireball split into pieces. Others swore it burned steady until it vanished. A few claimed it exploded in the east, a distant rumble echoing minutes later like far-off cannon fire. Still, others said it faded in silence, leaving only a ghostly light trembling in the sky. For about 30 seconds, a half-minute of eternity, the night glowed like noon. And then, as suddenly as it began, darkness returned. But the world beneath it had changed. Some who had seen it dropped to their knees, convinced the heavens had opened. Others ran through the streets, shouting that war had come, that France had attacked, or God had spoken. And a few, those who would become the earliest astronomers of the modern age, simply stared upward and whispered to themselves, "What was that?" The next morning, the kingdom woke restless. There were no newspapers yet to capture it in headlines, no photographs to prove its existence, only letters and whispers and trembling memories. A London postmaster wrote that the sky did blaze as if the world were in flame. In the quiet counties, clergymen wrote sermons warning of judgment. And in the drawing rooms of the learned, men began sketching the event, trying to fix the image before it slipped away. For the first time in recorded British history, thousands had seen the same celestial event. From the coasts of northern Scotland to the fields of London, it was witnessed by nobles and paupers alike. But no one could agree on what it meant. It was too large for a comet, too bright for ordinary meteors, and no one, not even the keen minds of Windsor, could explain the eerie silence of it. The sky had burned but made no sound, until, minutes later, faint thunder rolled across the horizon, as if the heavens themselves had sighed. Centuries later, scientists would calculate that the meteor had traveled hundreds of kilometers through the upper atmosphere, possibly from the northwest over Scotland, passing across the North Sea and descending somewhere near the Netherlands. But to those below, time itself had paused. Imagine it. No streetlights, no engines, no hum of cities, only the night, and a fire crawling across the firmament, white as death, slow as prophecy. A world illuminated just long enough for everyone to wonder if it was ending. That was the night the sky caught fire, and for days after, Europe could not stop talking about it. Chapter 2: Across Heaven's Path. The fireball of August 18th did not belong to one place. It traveled, slow and unbroken, across an entire continent's worth of sky. From the northern coasts of Scotland to the warm fields of southern England, from the ships drifting in the North Sea to the watchtowers of the Netherlands, witnesses saw the same impossible streak of light. It was as if the heavens themselves had drawn a single glowing line across the world. And for once, the entire world was looking up. At Windsor Castle, the event was seen by a small group of gentlemen, astronomers and artists among them, gathered on the castle's north terrace. They included Thomas Sandby, the Royal Academy's founding member, and his brother Paul, a painter. Both men would later try to capture what they saw in oil and watercolor, the long, burning trail of the meteor suspended in the summer dusk above the castle's towers. Those paintings still survive today, quiet and pale, the memory of a 30-second miracle frozen in paint. In their accounts, the brothers described a great body of fire that, quote, passed very slowly, dividing into several fragments before vanishing beyond the horizon. The air was still. No sound accompanied the light. Yet a few minutes later, a deep rumbling shook the air, traveling for miles. It wasn't thunder, not truly, but something older, more distant, as though the sound had arrived too late to belong to the event itself. Elsewhere, letters carried the same confusion. In York, a clergyman wrote that the fireball crossed the whole expanse of heaven, with a tail that glowed behind it for near a minute. He swore it illuminated the rooftops like lightning, but softer, longer, and strangely silent. In Cambridge, another observer described it as a line of flame, the color of melted metal. In Lincolnshire, a farmer believed he saw it fall to earth beyond the hills. And by dawn, people had begun to walk into the countryside, searching for the place where it landed. They found nothing. No crater, no fragments, not even smoke. Across the North Sea, sailors reported the same sight, a light brighter than the moon, gliding just beneath the clouds. Some thought it a new kind of weapon, a fire sent by man rather than by God. Remember, this was 1783. The century of revolution had just begun. Rumors traveled faster than reason. A glow in the sky might have meant war as easily as wonder. And when thunder rolled over the waves a few minutes later, the sailors took it as proof that somewhere, something had exploded. The meteor's path crossed over Belgium, northern France, and perhaps as far as Germany. In Paris, the news spread quickly through the scientific circles of the Enlightenment. Astronomers wrote to their British counterparts comparing notes and angles, measuring how far the object must have been to be seen across so great a distance. Slowly, a pattern began to form. The fireball had moved nearly 600 kilometers, a staggering journey for something that lasted less than a minute. In London, debate filled the coffee houses. Was it a comet fragment? An aurora? Some strange atmospheric effect? Few had the knowledge to answer, but everyone had an opinion. Some dismissed it as a trick of light. Others whispered of prophecy, of a flame that crossed the kingdom in warning. Newspapers began to carry second-hand accounts, though few editors dared claim to understand it. One called it a celestial occurrence of unknown kind. Another simply printed the headline, "The Burning Sky." But beyond the scholars and skeptics, there were the ordinary witnesses, the ones whose words never made it to paper. A shepherd in Devon whose flock scattered in terror when the night turned white. A widow in Kent who said she saw the face of an angel in the light. A group of children in Sussex who later swore that the stars had quote from their places. These accounts, half lost and half remembered, remind us that history is made not only of data, but of awe. As days passed, the stories grew stranger. Some said the meteor had changed direction mid-flight. Others said it broke into 7 pieces, like candles blown by the wind. There were tales of colored sparks, red, green, violet, trailing in its wake. And though none of these details could be proven, all of them share one thing: a deep human need to make sense of the impossible. For the astronomers, this event was a chance to measure the sky itself. For the ordinary people of 1783, it was something else entirely. A moment when the known world trembled. Because when the sky changes, when the familiar order of stars and silence is replaced by something alive, something burning, the boundary between science and superstition collapses. For those few moments, everyone was united by the same thought. We are so small beneath this. And yet, in the calm that followed, another feeling crept in. Not fear, but curiosity. Questions began to rise in the quiet minds of those who'd seen the fireball and lived to tell of it. What was it made of? Where did it come from? And if the heavens could send down such a thing once, might they do it again? The meteor of 1783 had traveled farther than anyone could imagine, its silent passage weaving together the voices of scholars, sailors, and shepherds across nations. But its meaning was still unclaimed. To some, it was divine warning. To others, the birth of a new science. To most, it was just an unanswered question, glowing faintly in the memory of a single August night. By the end of that year, reports of the event had reached almost every learned society in Europe, and with each retelling, it grew from a curiosity to a mystery and from a mystery to a myth. But beneath the legends, the truth waited quietly, shimmering just beyond human understanding. The fire had crossed heaven's path. The next chapter would show how it crossed the minds of those who watched it, between faith and fear, reason and revelation. Chapter 3. The Fear and the Faith. In the summer of 1783, Europe was caught between two worlds, one ruled by faith and another just learning to trust in reason. The Great Meteor arrived in the middle of that fragile balance, a sudden flame in the sky that seemed to demand explanation. For the priests and preachers, it was simple, a sign. To the newly awakened minds of science, it was something more complicated. A question the heavens had whispered without an answer. In small towns and parishes across Britain, church bells rang long after the light had faded. People gathered under candlelight as clergymen read from Revelation, verses about fire and judgment, stars falling from heaven, and the end of all things. Some villagers swore the meteor was shaped like a cross. Others claimed they heard voices in the thunder that followed. The older generations, raised on prophecy and plague, saw no reason to doubt that heaven was sending a message. But in the cities, the tone was changing. London, Bath, Edinburgh, places where books and telescopes had begun to replace sermons as the instruments of understanding, took a different view. The scholars at the Royal Society exchanged letters filled with careful words like trajectory, altitude, and combustion. They did not yet know what meteors truly were, but they sensed this event was no miracle, no warning, just the natural world revealing a new secret. For them, awe did not cancel reason, it sharpened it. Still, even the learned could not shake a quiet unease. Many who observed the fireball that night later wrote of an emotion they could not define. Not terror exactly, but a trembling sense of scale. They felt, perhaps for the first time, the true immensity of the universe and their place within it. Some called it divine humility, others simply called it fear. And so, for a brief moment in 1783, science and superstition walked side by side. Priests and astronomers spoke of the same sky, and though they disagreed on what it meant, they shared the same wonder. It was a rare thing, a night when knowledge and belief were not enemies, but reflections of the same mystery. By winter, the sermons had faded, and the prayers turned back toward earthly concerns. But something had shifted. The meteor had not brought an apocalypse, it had brought perspective. It reminded Europe that even as faith trembled and science rose, both were still small beneath the same endless sky. Chapter 4. The Science Awakens. In the weeks that followed the Great Meteor, letters began to move quietly across Europe. They carried sketches, observations, times of sighting, fragments of memory preserved in ink. The event had been seen by too many, across too wide a distance, for it to remain a rumor. And so, for the first time, scientists from different countries began to collaborate not to explain a miracle, but to measure a mystery. At the Royal Society in London, papers arrived describing the meteor's course. Observers in Scotland compared their notes with those from the south, and soon a crude triangulation was attempted. By using the times and angles recorded across the country, they could estimate how high the object had been. Not a fire in the clouds, but something far above them, moving silently through the upper reaches of the atmosphere. The idea was revolutionary. Until then, most believed meteors were weather, flashes of light born in the air, not visitors from beyond it. The notion that a rock or body could descend from the heavens was still dismissed by many scholars as superstition. Stones did not fall from the sky, they said. The heavens were immutable, divine, perfect. But the meteor of 1783 had left behind no room for such certainty. Among those most fascinated by the event was Charles Blagden, Secretary of the Royal Society. He collected reports from all over the kingdom, comparing handwriting, checking times, marking routes. His letters reveal a quiet excitement, the sense that the sky, long thought unreachable, could be studied like the earth itself. Blagden wrote that the meteor appeared to traverse the whole island, from north to south, with a brilliance that must have been visible to half of Europe. To him, it was not divine. It was data. Meanwhile, across the Channel, French astronomers were doing the same. They too had seen the light, and their calculations suggested an enormous scale. The meteor had traveled nearly 1/600 kilometers through the upper atmosphere, at a height of roughly 80 kilometers. This was no fire in the clouds, but a cosmic visitor grazing the edge of the world. It was through events like this one that the study of meteors slowly transformed from speculation into science. Decades later, researchers would identify such fireballs as bolides, immense meteorites that enter Earth's atmosphere and disintegrate under pressure and heat. But in 1783, that language did not yet exist. The observers of the time stood at the threshold of discovery, with only candlelight, quills, and their own sense of wonder to guide them. Even artists contributed to this awakening. Paul Sandby's painting of the meteor over Windsor Castle, calm and precise, became not just an artwork, but a scientific record. For generations after, astronomers would study it to understand how the light behaved, how it fractured and spread. The painting, once meant to capture awe, became evidence. In hindsight, the Great Meteor of 1783 marks an invisible turning point, when Europe began to trade superstition for curiosity and fear for investigation. The same event that once filled churches with prayer would later fill laboratories with instruments. And yet, the wonder never vanished. The more they learned about the heavens, the more the unknown expanded. Knowledge, it turned out, was not an end to mystery, only a doorway deeper into it. As the century turned and new discoveries followed, electricity, chemistry, planetary motion, the memory of that August night slowly dimmed, but its legacy lingered quietly in the minds of those who'd seen it. For many, it was the first proof that the universe was not still or perfect, but alive, moving, changing, unpredictable. The fireball of 1783 had traveled across the sky, but its true path was through human thought itself. It lit not only the night, but the age that followed. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Fireball. Time, even more than distance, has a way of erasing light. The Great Meteor of 1783, once bright enough to turn midnight into day, slowly dimmed in memory until it became little more than a footnote in old books and forgotten journals. For those who saw it, it was a moment that divided the ordinary from the divine. For those who came after, it became a story, one among many that the sky has written and then erased. By the dawn of the 19th century, the world had moved on. Revolutions had begun to reshape nations. Telescopes had grown sharper, and science was racing forward faster than memory could follow. The meteor, once a symbol of awe and uncertainty, no longer fit neatly into a world obsessed with progress. It faded quietly, absorbed by the steady march of discovery. And yet, in paintings, in letters, in a few surviving reports, it remains. You can still trace its path through the writings of Blagden, the sketches of Sandby, the murmurs of priests who thought they had witnessed the end of the world. Their words, fragile and fading, hold the afterglow of that single night, a reminder that even the most fleeting events can leave an enduring shadow. When we speak of history, we often think of wars, empires, and inventions, but sometimes history happens in silence. In the passing of a light across the sky, seen by thousands, remembered by few. The Great Meteor was one such moment. No victory, no disaster, just a shared breath of wonder. A night when the world looked up together and felt both terrified and alive. Today, we know what it was. A bolide, a large meteor burning as it met the atmosphere, scattering into fragments that never reached the ground. Science has given it shape and reason. But what reason cannot capture is the feeling of that night. The silence before, the brilliance during, the darkness after. Those who saw it didn't just witness a meteor. They witnessed their own smallness against the endless sky. Perhaps that's why the story still matters. In a time before electricity, before photography, before the noise of our modern world, the people of 1783 saw the universe speak, not in words, but in light. They did not understand it, but they felt it. And sometimes, that is enough. 240 years later, the sky remains the same vast canvas, and we are still staring upward, still searching for meaning in the spaces between stars. The fireball of 1783 is gone, its light scattered beyond time, but its echo remains in us, in the quiet awe we feel when we see the sky flash for a moment and realize we are watching something both ancient and new. So perhaps it was never truly forgotten. Perhaps it lives on every time someone looks up at the night and wonders what else might be moving through the dark, unseen. The meteor came and went, but it left behind the simplest truth of all, that we are temporary, the universe is eternal, and for one fleeting night in 1783, both were the same. The light faded, but the memory remained. A reminder that even the brightest moments disappear into the dark. Thank you for listening to History Obscura. If you find beauty in forgotten things, stay a while. There are more stories waiting in the shadows.